Hello guys, and welcome back to I Never Knew That. So if you watched last week's video, you will know that today we will be talking about the USS Tang. The USS Tang was a United States military submarine used in World War II. It was commissioned in December 15th, 1941, only 8 days after the United States entered World War II. The Mare Island Naval Shipyard was commissioned to build the submarine, and the shipyard ended up building 89 ships before being closed in 1970. The shipyard was located in California and has now been named a national landmark. The Tang was launched for the first time in August 17, 1943, and arrived in Pearl Harbor on January of 1944. There it was trained for 2 weeks and then departed for combat. It was 311 feet, 10 inches long, and 27 feet and 4 inches wide. It had 4 engines and was pushing around 5,700 horsepower when surfaced and around 2,740 horsepower when submerged. The top speed was 23 miles an hour when surfaced and about 10 miles an hour when submerged. The range running at 12 miles an hour on the surface was about 13,000 miles, and the endurance was 48 hours running at 2.3 miles an hour while submerged. The test depth, which in the United States Navy is 2/3 of the designated maximum depth, was 400 feet. However, the Tang had been documented to dive deeper than 600 feet, which is deeper than the maximum recommended depth. The crew consisted of 10 officers and 68 enlisted crewmen. The armament was 6 forward 10x21 torpedo tubes, 4 aft torpedo tubes, a 127mm deck gun, and a 40mm and a 20mm cannon. When fully loaded, the Tang weighed 1,490 tons, so it's a very easy argument to make that it was a very dangerous submarine. During the first patrol, the Tang received 5 depth charges, but did not receive any damages. She sank the 6,800-ton Japanese ship Gyoten Maru, the 3,600-ton Fukuyama Maru, Japanese freighter, and the 6,800-ton Yamashimo Maru, the lead ship of the convoy. And finally, she sank the Choko Maru, a 1,794-ton cargo ship. All of these were sunk in the first war patrol of the Tang, which lasted from January 22nd, 1944, and ended around February 26, 1944. The submarine had fired all 24 torpedoes on board, 16 of which scored hits. On her second patrol, the Tang ended up getting assigned to lifeguard duty and ended up rescuing around 22 shot down airmen. We're going to go kind of quickly through the third and fourth war patrols. So on the third war patrol, the Tang sank around 16,292 tons of Japanese cargo, which was composed of 4 ships. The 4 ships were lined up, and the Tang only shot 1 torpedo, intending to take out 2 at a time, but ended up taking out all 4, not realizing that all 4 ships were lined up in a row. The Tang then went on to take out more Japanese ships and ended up getting to around 39,160 tons of cargo sunk during the third war patrol, which was around 10 ships. On the fourth patrol, the Tang sank 5 ships, which was composed of 2 freighters, a patrol yacht, an 8,135-ton transport ship, and a tanker. Alright, so now we've made it to the 5th war patrol, and this was the final one that the Tang went on. The entire story about the sinking of the Tang was recorded by the commanding officer, Richard O'Kane. Richard O'Kane had been part of more successful submarine attacks than any other submarine officer in World War II. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor, and I will have his citation for that medal in the description below if you would like to check it out. So the Tang departed for the 5th War Patrol on September 24th, 1944, and took part in a massive naval battle starting on October 24th. This battle was against 3 tankers, a transport ship, a freighter, and multiple escorts. The Tang surfaced in the middle of the formation and began firing on the tankers. Now these tankers were later identified as freighters, but we're going to refer to them as tankers throughout this because that's what they were thought to have been at the time. So the Tang sank 2 of the 3 tankers, and then the transport ship attempted to ram into the Tang. But the Tang was able to get inside the turning radius of the ship, so the ship avoided her. At the same time, the surviving tanker attempted to ram the Tang, but the Tang also avoided the 3rd tanker. So what actually happened was the tanker and the transport ship then actually hit each other. Right before the 2 ships collided, when they were both lined up, the Tang fired 4 torpedoes, and the ships collided while at the same time getting struck by the torpedoes from the Tang, and both of them sunk. Around this same time, a Japanese destroyer was called in and was approaching from the left. And at 2:30 the next morning, the Tang fired her last torpedo, because the Tang could only carry 24 torpedoes at a time. Once this last torpedo was fired, it actually began to turn very hard to the left. And the reason they knew this was because they could see the torpedo on the radar. Once it was noticed that the torpedo was turning to the left, the commanding officer, Richard O'Kane, started fishtailing the Tang using emergency power in hopes to avoid the torpedo. But the torpedo hit the rear torpedo room of the Tang, and the rear aft rooms exploded and began to flood with water. All the crew members then began to rush towards the forward torpedo room, since the Tang was slowly flooding from the rear to the front. And around this time, depth charges were dropped, which caused an electrical fire in the bridge, which caused an electrical fire in the forward battery compartment. 13 men made it out of the forward torpedo room using a Momsen lung, the only time a Momsen lung has ever been successfully used. But out of the 13 that escaped the room, only 5 of them survived. 78 men died in the sinking, and 9 people survived. 5 of them were from the torpedo room, and then there were the 3 officers on the bridge at the time that the Tang was hit by the torpedo. The 9 survivors were picked up by the Japanese frigate CD-34 after 8 hours of surviving in the water. They were then put into a prison camp until the end of the war. A memorial to the Tang and the people who served on it was built in the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana. And the way it works is visitors go into the simulator of the Tang, and they play a part of one of the crewmen while the Tang was going down. Upon exiting the simulator, there is a wall with photos of all the crew members on the Tang on its last mission. I've actually done this, and it does a very good job of commemorating the Tang and honoring the people who were on board. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as you know, at the end of our I Never Knew That, we draw a new topic to study this week. So let's draw our topic, and, well, one fell off. Let's see what it is. Oh wow, it is flat Earth. Okay, the only thing I know about flat Earth is that it's a theory that some people believe that the Earth is not round, but instead it is flat. And I've actually heard a good bit about it, but I don't know that much. So I'm going to study this, and I'll see you guys next week with a video on flat Earth. Bye.